Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Mavers, and I'm the co-owner of the Wilson Arms at Torver, and I am sat here today with Ted Walsh at the Windermere Motorboat Racing Club, which dates back to 1924, I think it is.
That's when we first started racing.
That's it. And one of the reasons for making this video is we've got Bluebird returning to Coniston tomorrow, and it kind of dawned on me that there hasn't been that much hype about it, and us being a local business in Torver, we really wanted to know kind of why have we not made this a more of a bigger event. So anyway, I've known Ted quite a while now, doing various things. So I thought I'd give Ted a ring because he was lucky enough to not race the boat, but honoured to actually drive the boat when it was refurbished. And I kind of knew about this, but he doesn't talk to me much about this when we do our normal day-to-day stuff. But he's got a fantastic story to tell about it, and I want to share that with you guys. So Ted, over to you really. And what's it like to drive the boat?
It's a good boat. It's like any other high performance item that you get involved with. It's got plenty of power, and it pretty much does what it's told. If it's feeling in the right frame of mind, you can't get away from the fact that it did spend 30 years of its life at the bottom of the lake, and has been rebuilt over the years.
So how did you manage to get the gig of driving the boat?
It was a fortuitous melding of being involved with telly for a few different reasons. We'd shot Scrap Heap Challenge, and we'd done some work on Scrap Heap, and we'd also done some work for Robbie Coltrane's Round Britain, both of which Gina Campbell had actually been involved with as well. And so I'd got relatively chatty with Gina over the couple of different gigs with different companies that we got involved with. And when the opportunity to drive, or the discussion about who was going to drive Bluebird K7 came up, my name was chucked into the ring. I'd been very involved with record breaking and racing in the UK over the previous 10 years or so. And so I still hold several world water speed and endurance records, mainly on Windermere and to some extent on Coniston. And I was at the time I had been British champion, Formula 2 champion 5 times, and world runner-up. So I had quite a lot of background and pedigree to sort of determine that actually I might be worthwhile.
And is it the quickest boat you've ever driven?
It is the fastest boat, and it certainly has the most potential, and it's probably got the most history.
I was going to say, to actually climb inside it, knowing that the last person to drive it never actually got out alive.
No.
It must be,
It was. I think, though, over the years, because it's not something that you would ever anticipate, and it certainly wasn't like a Formula 1 car, which had a bit of a crash and killed somebody, and they changed a couple of suspension bits and put the wheels back on, and they send out the next nut behind the wheel. The Bluebird K7 had been through a very traumatic event, and the general state of it when Bill Smith pulls it off the bottom of Lake Coniston 25 years ago was not really a usable boat. And what happened is, certainly from my perspective, is I didn't have a huge problem with those demons over the years, because it was a matter of Bill recovered it. There's a bit of shenanigans over the politics of what's actually going to happen with it and what's going to happen with it over the next couple of years. That gets out of the way, and then I'm up there fairly regularly because I want to see how it's all been screwed back together and how all those sorts of things. And although I wasn't involved from the very start, the Bluebird project team got on with it and did a magnificent job. So I arrive I don't know, after 10 years or so. But the boat's very much still in pieces at that time, as they are meticulously rebuilding each and every part of it. So it's a very protracted job.
How much of the original boat is, you know, percentage-wise, or you know what I mean? Is it?
Well, it depends on how you want to cut that particular number, really. The team have always pertained to they wanted to recover and they wanted to use 90%.
Wow.
But that's 90% of what they recovered.
Right, okay.
So you have to remember that quite a lot, over the years, there has been a little bit of picking off the bottom, because when the boat crashed, it literally blew itself into 1,000 pieces. And even when you look on the video of the boat crashing, it sort of goes in, and there's another splash that happens about 150 meters away. Well, that's the front beam of the boat, which holds the two sponsons at the front, pinging off and zooming off into the distance. So the recovery process was quite a protracted job, from what I could see and from what I've learned. But there was quite a lot of bits. The Navy divers back in '67 attempted to locate the wreck, and more importantly locate Donald, and they failed to do that. But what they did do is they recovered several other pieces. Most notable is the steering wheel and steering column.
Yeah.
And that component lives in somebody else's museum, and they didn't want to give it back. So strictly speaking, that part lived in somebody else's museum. And there are other quite large sections of bodywork which have been scavenged from the bottom or caught in fishing line or whatever that might be over the years. And those are in various other sort of museums and private collections.
The engineering behind the boat, is it original to the blueprint of its original build, or is it kind of case it looks?
Is it sort of like a bit of a facsimile?
Yeah, have we got a modern day racing boat underneath this?
No.
Old-fashioned.
It is very much a 1950s design aircraft, which has been made to work on the water. The guys who were involved with penning it and designing it had very strong aeronautical backgrounds, and they also had a strong cars, because they were also doing cars for Campbell as well at the time, and that really shows through and through in the construction of the boat and how it's all screwed together. The only thing that you sort of have to remember is that although it was designed by a prominent designer and essentially built by a company at that time that made buses, the factory was right next door to the Vulcan bomber factory, and the materials that Bluebird is made of aren't used in buses. So maybe, I don't know, a bit of material just made its way under the fence every now and again.
Yeah.
And although a similar tale could be said about a later record breaker, a guy called Lee Taylor, who apparently was going to be arrested by the FBI because he'd acquired a jet engine out of some F-16 or something or other that he had in his jet boat. But that's a different thing.
What was Donald's speed then when he? What did he?
So
was it 300 and?
The anecdote is 325 roundabout there. I think the
and you did 160.
Yeah, 160. So it's quite pedestrian, really.
I don't know. 160 on a boat is quite fast. It's fast.
It's like
it must that's at them speeds. It's not wanting to be a boat, is it? It's wanting to take off.
a lot of these things are in the design, and it's like if I was to take you out in a racing in a proper single seat, or if you'd have a drive in a single seat racing boat, compared to something like a good speedboat that we would use for a bit of water skiing or something like that. When you're driving along at 35 miles an hour, 45 or even 55 miles an hour in your speedboat, you're thinking, oh, this is really smoking along, and you're hanging on to it. You could get out of that and you could get into my Formula One racing boat, and you can drive past at 120 miles an hour with one hand on the wheel and smoking a cigarette, and it will feel like absolutely nothing. So a lot of the time, the design of record-breaking boats and the design of racing boats is that it's always the last 10% is where it really starts
pushing that.
Once it'll feel very nice and very smooth up to 95% of its potential.
Yeah.
And that will get you in the zone. But the things that win races and the things that break records and the things that break records that you can pin right up there are rinsing the last 5%. That's where it really matters.
Yeah, yeah. It arrives tomorrow in Coniston. What's been the backstory of the boat? Because it was 1967, I think, was when it crashed on Coniston. Bill Smith has recovered it. When did he recover the boat?
23 years ago, almost to the day.
To the day, right. So he's took it and he's rebuilt it with volunteers, blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah,
and raised money.
Yeah, there's lots
crowdfunding,
lots of public donation before crowdfunding, but lots of public donations of people getting involved, lots of industry donations from some very big players who took an awful lot of convincing that Smith was doing a good job, because they wouldn't want to get involved and they wouldn't want to put an awful lot of company time and their moniker on the promotional material if they didn't think that name would be worthy alongside it. So it took quite a lot of time and took quite a lot of engagement from Smith and the Bluebird project team to engage these companies to go about remanufacturing the fuel management system, which is that was quite an involved process. So there's an awful lot of background work that takes a staggering amount of time and an awful lot of meticulous organisation and planning in order to get to where we are today.
Did Bill Smith know the deal before he actually set out on to renovate the boat? So did he know that when he because you listen to some press releases that Gina Campbell's done and things like that says when it's used out on the water, it must come back to Coniston. Was that always the deal, and this kind of contract they refer to, or is that them kind of their interpretation, a loose interpretation of it, and why? Why is it gone so bad? So sour between.
Yeah, I think sour is probably a good word.
Between parties.
Yeah, I think it was one of those. It was a situation where it got recovered, and the main reason for why it got recovered is because we can, and that was the level of it at that point. That required some engagement with Gina and the family per se.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and Donald's ex-wife didn't really want to be heavily involved with it and passed that mantle exclusively to Gina. And Gina was keen to recover her father from the bottom of the lake. Bill's more of an engineer at the end of the day, and he wanted to recover the boat. And he was big into diving, and he was big into trophy seeking off the bottom of other wrecks in the North Sea and all over the world in reality. And he just saw that as a way of forwarding that part of his love and career of diving, really. So the boat gets recovered without really a solid plan in place. Yeah. And 3 or 4 years goes by in trying to create bids for heritage lottery funding and that sort of approach. But ultimately the lottery say, well, there's no point there's no point in rebuilding the boat to a running state, because there won't be anything left of the original boat, because you'll have to replace all of these parts that are clearly going to be past it. And so there's no point in doing that. Displaying a wreck is not really doing it any justice. So we're actually not going to fund it as a project, which is a bit crass because it is a national level icon of the day, and it probably did really deserve quite a lot of public funding at the end of the day. But what happens is Bill Smith owns an engineering company, and he knows an awful lot of people. And what happens is that as the Heritage Lottery say no, Bill Smith, bless him, sees it as a bit of a red rag and and decides to get on with it.
More determined than ever.
Yeah, but I think that helps sort of set the scene of the mental approach of somebody who's going to lead a project for the next 20 years and be able to rebuff all comers and deliver essentially what is a very well engineered rebuild of a horrifically crashed boat.
So the boat gets rebuilt by the team, the volunteers and Bill's team over there. Because I see sometimes there's pictures of yourself, Gina and Bill that I see online, smiling, happy together. Everybody's kind of, it looks like a wedding picture. It looks you're in front of the boat. Everybody loves each other. When did the cracks appear, and what's the fallout, and is it worth it? You know what I mean?
The team had always worked towards having an operational boat, and they'd worked very hard to that end. And the whole plan and the desire of going to Loch Fad on the Isle of Bute in 2018 was to basically give it a bit of a shakedown. And shake down the team. How does it launch? At the time, we weren't even sure how well it would float.
Was that with going to Loch Fad? Was that kind of with an idea to go to Coniston eventually?
Yes.
But you didn't want to put it on Coniston straight away to embarrass yourselves. Well, you wanted to go up there.
It broke down on Loch Fad a dozen times.
Yeah.
There was something physically wrong with it that needed a repair a dozen times. And if you just try and put yourself in the psyche of what's actually going on and how it's actually going to work, once you launch it, you're going to get 100,000 people show up. So that's not an audience that you want to mess with, and it's certainly not an audience where you basically go, well, it's not going to happen today because it's blown a fuse and we've got to take off all the closing plates on the side, we've got to lift the cover off, we've got to replace the fuse, which didn't exist when it was first built. We've got to replace the fuse so that we can get the electricity into the igniters and start the engine. So those sorts of events, one after the other, you just have to realise that it's a rebuilt 1952 vintage jet hydroplane using a vintage engine, and everything about it is very old, and to the best of the team's ability, has been recovered from parts that came off the bottom of the lake where they'd been there for 30 years. So it took a little while to get it right.
So we did the test run up in Scotland, and so where's this sort of what's the museum's idea for it, and your idea? Did they want to kind of lock it away in a room and never to be on the water again?
It's an interesting one, and where you can sort of draw the line in the sand of where did it change from this is great and we're loving it as an audience, and it's well screwed together and it has the capacity to deliver.
A great ambassador for Coniston.
Absolutely.
And a world-renowned symbol that could travel, tour the world.
Absolutely. And do all those sorts of things. And is being spoken about publicly at that time at every level. To literally it then going into a planning phase of we're going to bring it to Coniston, potentially in 2019, probably 2020 would have been nearer the mark. We go to Loch Fad, we run it around on Loch Fad, we get it into a state where it's sort of operational. We understand that it needs a load of other work to finish it off and fix the leaks and make the engine reliable and repair the igniters and do all these other things, which mean that you could actually take it out on Coniston, press the button and know that it was going to work. That was the next part of the work. In the meantime, the museum and all of the other combatants who were involved with the planning and thinking stages, their job is to knock together a plan of how when it's going to arrive, when you're going to operate it. There's an awful lot of debate about when it should be operated, and for the sake of the discussion, the Park Authority are keen for it to be at the cold and less frequented ends of the year, and that might be the case for the town and or the museum to some extent. But from the team's perspective, they're going, well, actually, you want to show this thing, and you've got like 2 hours a week in November where you could show it. but in summer you've probably got 3 days a week where you could show it. So how are you going to square that circle? And so there's an awful lot of argy-bargy about what that means. And Bill Smith and the team are adamant that there should be an R in the month to actually, or not an R in the month, to make sure that it's, you want a summer's gig, basically. I think that sort of starts to sort of set the cracks in place at that point, because there's obviously some disparity of thought between the museum and what the team want to do. And
as far as I understand it was offered, was he offered 3 months use of it out of the 12?
There is, and again, I've not really been part of the actual negotiations of that, but I am led to believe, and I have belief in, what happened is that a document was pulled together where what the team wanted to do was have the boat available for 3 months of the year. Essentially, it would be out of the museum for 3 months of the year, while it was prepared, run, and then returned to a museum state in potentially any 1 year. Because of the practicalities of delivering these things and all the rest of it, it was highly unlikely it was going to happen on an annual basis. It was probably going to be more like a biannual sort of setup. That document did exist, but it came with a whopping caveat at the bottom, which was the RM have right of veto. We can say, well, no, you can't have it this year. And that, again, just sort of set a line in the sand, which I don't think Bill Smith and the team were prepared to sort of allow themselves to be put into.
I think from what I can gather on the engineering side, 3 months is a long time, is it, to actually prepare a boat like that?
No.
And
using volunteers.
Yeah,
and
you've got to get it. You've got to get it to where it needs to be.
Yep.
It's got to be prepped, ready to go. Get in, and then all of a sudden you're going to be running out of time. So I do understand that, but is there no trust and flexibility on both sides? I mean, is there not? Could you?
A lot could have been done. I think at the end of the day.
Is there any reconciliation between the parties, would you say?
I don't know. It's
because that's the interest. It's for me. It's what's best for Coniston. It's what's best for. It's what Donald Campbell would have wanted.
You would have thought.
You would have thought he wouldn't really want it just locked locked away in a museum and not sort of.
I think the tantalising thing in this is it a museum piece or is it actually a working museum piece? And the tantalising opportunity to actually take it out and run it on a lake less than a mile from the museum is got to be a massive draw, and got to be something that you would have thought that the museum would aspire to. But the way things are happening at the moment, and the way that the museum appears to be positioning itself, is one of where, well, publicly we might talk about it, but getting to the delivery of that point is quite awkward. It's fair to say that the Bluebird wing of the Ruskin Museum is not a workshop.
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
We discussed this, didn't you? You said it could be a workshop though.
I think
you can make it. You could make £1 million spent already. Another few hundred thousand to replicate what is needed to support the boat in a working environment could be built in Coniston.
You can go to a cafe up the road and they milk cows next door to you. As you can have you drink your coffee and they're milking a cow next door. So you can do anything that you want. But at the end of the day, the Bluebird wing is purpose built. The museum is full of antiques and delicate artifacts that really wouldn't like loads of airlines and hammers and swarf and dust and all of these other bits and bobs floating around in that sort of environment. So I could see that would be quite awkward. Clearly, it would be possible to do. Clearly, at the moment, the RM don't have any level of facility to deliver that. So, although the boat, the structure of the boat is in an excellent state and is very usable, there is an awful lot of work required to put another motor in it and configure and set that up, and the new people of the Ruskin Museum won't have a great deal of experience of doing that in that boat, and I think that's where it is. So fair enough. you know, you can create a garage out of the Bluebird wing.
But I think
you can get enough people together.
If people would be like draw a line in the sand, and for me there's kind of a lot of similarities that, you know, of synergies of people, different things, and it coming together, and actually, you know, I think they want the same thing, or similar things. The devil's in the detailing, but, you know, with the right enthusiasm, you can make it happen. And if with the, you know, if Bill and the team and the volunteers it has.
Again, I think it sums up, because a lot of the time after running on Loch Fad, people would come to me and say, "Oh, you're going to run on Coniston.
Well,
what day are you going to run? What day are you going to run on Coniston?" And you're like, "Well, we're not going to run on one day, because that's crass." You've got, how are you going to organise? If you told the rest of the world that the only time you're actually going to be able to see Donald Campbell's Bluebird squirt up Lake Coniston for the rest of time is on the 21st of September 2026.
And the weather's not going to be right, the fuse is going to pop. I understand, I get it.
How do you get all the people there? How do you feed them? How do you get enough ambulances there to look after people who are going to fall over and hurt themselves? How is the RM going to even organise that? How's the National Park going to organise that? How is the team going to organise that? Now, the team rebuild boats, and Bill Smith made it very clear from the start, you roll out the red carpet, we'll push the boat down it. But rolling the red carpet out is your job, not ours. And to some extent, that's sort of where it started to all fall down. At the back end of 2018, early 2019, there appeared to be some managerial changes, and a new and very definitive, we're not working with these people ever again, suddenly just shows up. And so there's a very distinct change in ethic, which has basically led to where we are today.
Well, thank you so much. Is there any frustration that you would like, you know, or summary that you would like to say before we wrap this up today?
Well, it is clearly a patently ridiculous situation. The museum can't display Bluebird without showing that its previous 20 years metamorphosis from piece of scrap to functional and beautiful K7 restored in the state that it is. You can't alienate all those people, and it can't pay lip service by saying, well, thanks, now on your bike, because that's disingenuous at best. And so there really does need to be a lot more engagement to the people who have actually done the work, and some public showing by the museum that they've done a good job, and that actually we're very grateful for these people for two things. One, for doing it, and then ultimately, although it might have taken a little while, agreeing to allow it to go back and actually get on with it. And you could get an awful lot of argy-bargy in there. Well, it's not their property in the first place, but they've got a lot of sweat and tears in there. You take a look at the pictures of the dive team 25 years ago, and the people pulling that thing out of the mud 100 metres below are children. They are boys. They're like 25, 30. Half of them are dead now.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that life passes us by, and all those people who put all that time and effort in, and there's been an awful lot of people through the team over the years who've painted paint and riveted rivets. And I remember going up there. Like 15 years ago, and the whole tail cover is in pieces, and it's all stripped down to individual rivets, and they're digging out individual rivets. And I'm looking at the rows of these rivets on here thinking, oh my Christ, it's going to take years just to put the rivets back in. Never mind straighten the metal out. So to get back to the premise of the question, which is, do they need to sort their acts out between themselves? Yes, clearly they do. Bluebird can't be displayed in the museum just completely forgetting about what the last 20 years were. And the opportunities that would be good for the museum per se really do need to be picked up. Otherwise, as is the threat with these things, and as is the displays that you see with Campbell's other world record breaking car that sits in Bowloo Museum, it's borderline piece of scrap. It's been allowed over the years never to be run. It's just up on jacks. The corrosion is setting in, and it's basically becoming a shell of what it could be done. Wouldn't it be far more of the pair of them wouldn't be a fantastic national icon to have the car rebuilt, the boat in an operational state? That would be surely a great thing.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see the vision. Thank you so much, Ted, for sort of sharing that with us, and what an interesting sort of update of to where we are, and if there is anything I can do, or any of our local people can do, Gina Campbell, regards of repairing what we need to do and pulling the communities together and the teams together, I'm more than happy to sort of to try and involve myself in that. But thank you so much, Ted, and
my pleasure.
Commodore.
Good luck tomorrow.
The Commodores tomorrow. So thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.